Alright. Hello, everyone. This should be the study review as a follow-up to the Play and Explain number 6. I don't know. Let me know if anyone watching this actually likes this type of content, because I can do this more often, or I can just keep doing what I've been doing with the description. It's a weirder format, I have to do improve on it, but the way I'm gonna go about it for now is I've wrote down the spots that I'm gonna be reviewing, like the main hands after I watch the VOD briefly over, and I'm just gonna be studying them. This is gonna be weird, because never done that. Let's hope it goes well. Alright. So sometimes on a Wizard, this is currently the program I'm using to study. I think it's a pretty good software. I think it's pretty good for getting into theory, because the preset solutions really do open your eyes to stuff. And I think if you are learning Pi, you might just, I don't know. I have been meaning to get it because I think there are some nodes where it's just like, okay, my opponent. I'll show a couple examples, maybe my slight criticisms with the software, but overall, I think it's just really, really solid. And yeah, I've enjoyed using it, so this is what I'm using. No, not sponsored, obviously. Um, but yeah. Alright, so in this node, what was this hand? It was 5-4-3-3. I think I had ace 3 off and I checked back, right? So ace 3 off is opening at a mix. And I was looking at this board is actually a slightly higher frequency check than I thought when I initially looked, but it makes sense in position. You never should be checking back too much. Like, just for curiosity's sake, what is the board on check check where you're checking the absolute stone least amount? Checking back the most. It's actually some ace king board, believe it or not, which I'm sure most people wouldn't have got. And that's due to those boards you're simply just polarizing the over better check. It's a higher EV strategy than betting 1/3 with range. And I think it is even more profitable versus fish. So if you're a reg and you're like in some low pool, I really recommend just adapting this strategy. I'm telling you, it just performs so much better versus recreationals too. Just because it feels good to, I don't know, bet your like random shit hand and win the pot sometimes because they can't have an ace or king. Learn the check check node. It's not too challenging. And start playing real poker. Because I see too many regs bet that spot for 1/3 and it's just so ridiculous. Button versus. I think the earlier position you get. I'm getting sidetracked, but you know what? It's okay because I think most people would rather care about that. The earlier position you get with this type of spot. Let's go ace king. Let's just do rainbow. The more your 150% or 125% goes up, and the less you check because you just hit the board more often. Oh, this is under the gun. So under the gun you actually play not too many. Okay, I was confused for a sec. I was like, huh? But yeah. I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, you see how you're never checking, but you're mixing all three. This is a strategy you can adapt. And I personally, I like to play overbet and then just mix the 1/3. I think it's an easier, simple adjustment. I mean, I could be making mistakes. Like in Wizard, it's really hard to just like tell that's what you want to do. I'm sure you could maybe go into the simplified solutions maybe, and it would give you it. No, yeah, I don't recommend this. Because I think it's just such a waste to simplify. I think on this board, when you do the simple solutions, it's good. But simplified, I don't know. I think if you're studying poker, a lot of people, the wave now is like, oh, just simplify the spot, simplify. You can't make an EV error. But personally, I just think, then what are you really doing? You're just gonna, like, everyone now just bets a third on every flop. Don't be the guy who bets a third on every flop. I think if you're gonna study poker, be the guy who doesn't bet a third on every flop. Personally. That's personally my mindset towards the situation, because I was doing it, and then when you're running at a certain win rate and you're justifying saying you're playing very well, but you're really just simplifying. Because you can almost oversimplify everything, and then at the end of the day you're just oversimplifying, and then you're just pure exploiting from there. Like a lot of micro stakes player will just bet 1/3 on every flop. If they have a hand that they think they should bluff, they'll bluff it. If they have a good equity bluff, they'll maybe pick the right slicing over bet or whatever, and then they'll go from there. And then maybe they'll exploit what population's doing. Then they're just playing population poker. But oh, this was 200 big blinds this whole sim, was it? This sim was not ran at 200 bigs, so I'm confused why it did that to me. Anyway, I got so sidetracked there, but it's okay. That's just my 2 cents on it. If anyone has a different opinion, let me know. I'm actually I've learned poker completely by myself. I've obviously watched YouTube and content, but I've never had a coach or anything. So if someone has another opinion that they have from a credible person, and I don't mean some random like YouTube coach saying everything, because you can find the opposite opinion from some other guy anyway, like just some insight. I would love to hear it. But yeah, that's my personal opinion. Anyway, back to the fucking hand. Sorry. In the moment, I didn't think I was going to be betting too often on this board. I felt like my hand just performed better as a check. Oh, this is big blind. Yeah. And then I felt like my hand performs better as a check. I think obviously we're raising turn. Here at the ace of hearts, it did like to bet. You can see the EV is actually like slightly making money, which wouldn't worry too much about it. But yeah, I think with the ace of hearts here, you actually like to have some like hands. Obviously a 3 is strong. And I think it's you want some 3x that can continue versus a raise when you bet it. Is that the idea? Because I'm assuming if I go 1/3, let's say this is a lead. You should play leads, by the way. And that also is something to look into, because if we go, and Wizard especially, we'll go to the sim, he's supposed to be leading 41%, and you see some of the hands, like 5s and 4s and 3s are leading very high frequency, 6 is leading extremely high, 7-6 leading half the time. So when he checks, granted he's like, and he's not leading his complete dog shit pure, right? Or half the time at the sim rate he's leading his actual good hands. His checking range is technically supposed to be a little weaker. Like if we go to the, let's see if we can. If I take his check equity, does it change? I've never done this before, but I am curious. Oh yeah, it does change. Why was I not paying attention? His hands down here change. Apparently his equity doesn't change, but yeah. He slightly has less of the good hands when he checks. You see this? His equity should go down. I don't know why it doesn't adjust, but yeah. Anyway. Back to teaching sorry, I'm all over the place. But this is how I am when I study. I usually set a timer for 45 minutes and I go with it. I can usually go longer, but yeah. Just kind of like fiddling around and just enjoying it, I think, is something that most people don't do. They'll just click and be like, yeah, I played that well. Oh, and that's not a bluff. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think actually trying to just fiddle around the spot, you're not going to be perfect, but I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, here I think I would simplify to just 1/3 or check on this board. I think almost every hand bets a third. And it's just easier to pilot the spot like this. I also think people just perform really bad versus the 1/3, simply for the fact that they think you are playing a range bet strategy when you're not. You're probably betting like, if you're betting 1/3 here, you're probably betting close to 50%. I'm assuming, right? Because you're checking 54, and you'd probably bet a little more. But yeah. Anyway, I'm assuming. Okay, let's look at this now. Villain's response, I'm assuming, is to be pretty aggressive here. Expecting a lot of 50% raise, and I'm assuming. Okay, all 3x continues pure. We actually turn this hand into a 4-bet. I don't think it's too necessary. I think this is some spot where you, in real poker, you wouldn't need to. And by real poker, I don't mean like if you're playing like this isn't a profitable action. I'm sure it's a profitable, it obviously is, but versus population, this spot is just, you're not going to probably get the intended result. Maybe versus a certain player, he's raising a lot and then he's overfolding, and this is actually a great hand to do it with. But I mean, generally, people are over tighter in the raising range. But I don't know. Actually, I don't even know if that's true. I think people could actually find a lot of air balls. Maybe this is actually a sneaky line. But the ace of hearts, I mean, you are blocking continues with the ace of hearts. It's like you block bluffs, but he's supposed to have some random air balls, right? Like some queen 7 clubs backdoors. He's never folding ace 8 of hearts. So you're actually just blocking his calling range or his shoving range. So some people might get misguided by the ace 8 of hearts there. But anyway, this spot, I just wanted to see what I did on the turn, and that's what we're going to look at. That's the main course of action. Because turn peeled off. God, I'm gonna have to go faster. How long have I been recording? 9 minutes. All right, we'll be better. Main action was I wanted to see on the turn after check. What I was actually curious about. And okay, so big blind led 1/3. I looked, and he's never actually doing this in practice. It doesn't really make much sense for him to play a 1/3 range. I think actually a lot of his overpairs aren't good enough to bet. Like 6s and 7s are just too strong. Like what is the equity of them? 80%. They should be betting very strong. They're very weak, and they shouldn't be block betting. Just because I have check back repairs does not mean anything. I mean, it's just not enough large enough part of my range from the button. So yeah. Anyway, I was thinking here, and I think mainly we could raise both sizings. We obviously do call sometimes, but not too often with the heart, which is a little odd because you would think that some of the hearts are the hands you can get value from. But yeah, it's weird because my initial thought would be you would be raising bigger without the heart because he has a lot of ace hearts, but maybe that's just as played because of the B33. He's also supposed to be checking a lot of his nut flushes, but in practice that's probably not happening too much. Let's be real. I think in practice people would be very over aggressive with these hands. So it's always good to see what they're supposed to do. Anyway, let's give him a normal size and see how we're supposed to pile out the spot, because I am just a little curious. Alright, actually mainly calling here. I think it's just your check back range is so capped. Like, building a raising range just around 3x is kind of tough to do. So you might as well just protect it, and that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, moving on to a more interesting spot, which most of the other spots should be more interesting. This one should be. I believe this is my queen deuce. I already did look at this hand, so. But yeah. Here on the flop I said I was testing my friend. I usually just mix in over better check strategy. And over better bet 33 strategy, but I think from the button you actually do have to mix checks looking at it now. So I think you should do both. I think it's all three of these sizings. That's what I would recommend you find. Personally, I think that's going to perform the best. I think you have to mix checks. It's pretty easy to find with like these like middling ace x, these slight under pairs, and then maybe your weaker king x you can mix checks. As long as you roll, like it's not that hard to. It's not really not that hard to do. And yeah. And if you have a read someone's overfolding, just bet 33. But yeah. Anyway, we go for the B33 with our queen deuce, which is most of the time going to be the more common action. Let's see. I'm curious. Queen 10 actually does prefer bet 33 most of the time here, which is interesting. So it's one thing not to get too carried away with this type of hand. I think the shittier straight. That makes sense actually. Anyway, what I'm trying to think is I think queen 9 likes overbetting. Because you still have the ace queen on certain straight runouts to have it in your bet 33 range. But I think if you only overbet the queen 10, you don't have enough straights on the bet 33 spot. Anyway, just something to note. And your bet 33 on this drive board, I don't think needs to be too built around like insanely good draws. I think you want some of your draws in your smaller range to play later streets. Turn comes with a 9 and queen 10 gets there. And here I think especially with the hearts version, you're just almost overbetting pure. It was the read I had. Obviously spades with the extra equity you pick up, but also hearts, because if you look at it here, most of his God, what am I saying? Obviously pair, but then if you go into non-pair, like the first hand that's not a pair, maybe the ace of spades, but that's the flush card. Basically the first non-equity driven card is the queen of hearts, right? Because the queen of hearts gives you basically 0 equity on this board, and the reason why is because your opponent is going to float a lot of hands with the I don't know, queen eight of clubs. Let's see what he's calling with on the flop actually. The other queens. See queen eight of hearts is mucking pure. Queen 5, everything's calling queen of hearts, not calling pure. He has very little non-made queen of hearts in his calling range. So you can see queen 9 calling, but okay. Actually, technically you would block. He actually calls more queen 9 here. Funny enough. But yeah, generally the queen of hearts is a very good card. Yeah, for that reason, because most of his queen of hearts is just pure folding. And yeah, outside of this like little thing that maybe he would raise more with the queen 9 because he has the backdoors, but that's a very selective hand. And also by the turn a 9 is revealed, so it's even less likely. Yeah, so we're finding the overbet here mainly like it's a important concept. When you don't interact with any of these cards and you bet, it's less EV to bet it on the flop. Like if you look, I imagine the hand with the least EV is the queen deuce of hearts. Obviously you cannot hit a backdoor, right? And but on the turn, you see how it becomes a slightly higher EV hand because your opponent is more weighted to weaker hands. Obviously the hand that can actually make a nuts hand, a nutted hand, has more equity than it. But yeah, and then when he calls and the ace comes off, you look at the spot, and you are just shoving. You're ripping all the queen deuce pure here. You can rip all of this as long as you remember you have to rip your sets for value here and your ace king, I think. It's hard to have a lot of ace king in this node as played, and I think one leak I realized as I was jamming this hand is I realized I might be overbetting my queen ten too much on the flop. Anyway, I talked to my friend. He said he folded because I was playing the same first one. He said he folded king jack here, and if you look, this hand makes 3 big. So this is a spot that most people wouldn't find, and it actually makes a shit ton of money versus population. Like if you look, like people are not. I don't care what you say about your game. Most of the players you play versus in your micro 6 games are not finding calls here with these types of hands, and you might like tilt like, oh my god, he called queen jack. He's not even like supposed to necessarily not call it. So I think in this spot it's just a pretty clear, obvious jam. And if they start calling you, you're just gonna like just don't bluff them anymore for a bit. Just take a note and just like print. Like just keep ripping it in profitable spots. Like, hey, okay, I'll just give up my 10-6. Fuck it. If you think he's stationing you, but at least you know you do it. You know, once he calls you once or twice, okay. But yeah. Anyway, what I wanted to look at when I was looking at this hand, because I'm already cheating. I already looked at that hand. Is if the river is not an ace. Our all-in frequency just go a bit down, but queen deuce is just going for it. Makes sense. You just have to go for it here. And opponent is obviously calling his king jack even more. And yeah, he's mixing these calls. But yeah, you see I used to call 27% here. It's just usually not happening. Anyway, on to another spot because I'm a genius and I played that perfectly. King 6-5-3. What I wanted to check here is I don't think you're building a range betting range, and I had pocket eights in this spot, I believe. It's funny because I have to remember the hand I had, but I have a pretty good memory. So, obviously he's not leading. So eights is actually betting a good amount here. And just for curiosity, I'm curious about the equity. Yeah, it's winning. But obviously eights is like, the thing about eights' equity is very different than a hand like ace 10 of clubs equity. Because I think, what is it? Would EQR show it? Yeah. A hand like eights, it's what's it called? Ace 10 of clubs actually slightly has higher equity, or it's like the same. But ace 10 of clubs obviously has way more potential to make the nuts. If you have a king on this board, you're just drawing dead with eights basically. So it's not as good of a hand just for like actually making money purposes in poker. Like you need to make the way you make a lot of your money in poker is hitting good hands. That's what even the computer thinks. Like so, because if you look at probably the EV of the hand, ace 10 of clubs is worth basically 4 bigs, and eights is worth like 2 bigs. So this hand is worth 2 more big blinds. And versus worse players, it could be even worth more. Obviously, when it goes check check, if you don't know your opponent, you're supposed to. I think I do recommend actually learning a 250 strategy. It's not too hard to develop and learn, and players perform so bad versus it. But basically here, you just don't need to reopen anything. You can play some blocks, but there's just really low incentive to be betting anything that's not beating a king. Basically, like at a 250. Yeah, you're basically polarizing to 2 pair plus on the turn is basically the idea versus the checking range. And I don't think it's just not usually too profitable to be reopening these kings in this type of node. It's better to take advantage of the low card. I'm sure, let's see if it comes off a 9. I expect this to go down. It's probably going to be more in this area. Yeah, you're almost still 90% check. So you do have to be very cautious because, yeah. I do think the spot is like pretty telegraphed weak though, so I don't mind you attacking it wider. I think you could just maybe develop bet a little more, play a 150 strategy maybe, but I don't know. Oh yeah, I think the 250 is just really fun to play. It's really fun to play, so I recommend learning it because it's just really enjoyable. I haven't got too many spots in the videos yet to do it. I've definitely missed some, but yeah, pretty enjoyable spot. Anyway, back onto what actually happened in real poker. I was looking at mainly what I reopened with on the after he checks. The eights, and the eights is you see is betting, and it actually I bet half pot here because I just didn't think I was gonna be betting 33 in position, but yeah, the half pot is also fine. I recommend here almost reopening just for half. Maybe the 1/3 does play better. I don't know. It's up to you really, but yeah. Anyway, that's a pretty boring hand. I just wanted to see if I reviewed eights, and I said in the video I was gonna review it. Oh, here I wanted to check if I had a range bet on the flop, and here what I made a mistake is I actually 3-bet 7-6 here. And it's not a 3-bet. But if you look, also I kind of had the wrong read because these lower hands, excluding the ones at the club, funny enough, are actually just betting pure. They're just way better as bluffs. And just out of curiosity, let's see what happens if we get called what we're doing with it on most turns. Let's do like diamond diamond because we basically can't turn anything. What? Oh, let's give him a call. This is one of the features I like doing with Wizard. Sort by suit, filters. Let's do 6-5 diamonds. And if we bet again, unless it's a heart, we are just completely giving up. So basically the hand is just higher EV bet on the flop. And I'm sure, let's just say, okay, and I'm sure it finds a river bluff. Check, check. Strategy, opponent. Let's give it like, what's a river we would see in a game? Like a fucking, I'm sure on an 8 it's gonna find it. He's probably not supposed to check. Let's give him a river he's checking on. But then this is also intuitive. So it's just kind of like obvious. Like obviously you're going for it. You're actually playing the OBE because like, well, you're really just repping ace queen. I guess you just have so much of it in this line. Is he just not supposed to check his ace queen and he's capped or something? This is a weird ass line. Oh, it's because UTG doesn't really have AQo. That's why. We have it pure. That makes sense. We have so much of it in this node. That makes sense. I think in practice people aren't barreling it hard enough, but yeah, it makes sense to find that here. You're supposed to be so aggressive. So like if you're ever like concerned, like you literally can just do it 51%. And let's say you pick a shit hand. What's a hand that's like a check that you're not supposed to? You think sevens is good enough because it's too weak, and you find what is it 140? You're losing basically nothing, so you just go for it here. I think the key is you gotta understand spots where your range is doing something, and even if you pick the slight wrong range combo or hand combo because this hand actually has enough equity to check back, just send it. Like IMO. I'd probably send 7 here. I think, yeah, if you can bluff 50%, you can almost get away with doing anything. Oops, open my Discord. Hopefully I didn't expose anything. Right, what was this hand? I'm trying to remember. Oh, I remember. I had ace deuce in this hand and we were 200 bigs deep, right? Yes. And I realized ace deuce is actually not a call pre 200 bigs deep. It is not a call. What is the EV loss? Like, actually a decent amount. That's a good amount. 727, but yeah, calling most suited ace 6 deep as you can see. And ace deuce actually does. It's one of the good candidates to 4-bet bluff actually. I think at 100 bigs it becomes a solid candidate as well. I'm not gonna do it because it would slide on the video. But yeah. Opponents snap check this board, I remember when I was playing. And the snap check is just so telling because like why would you ever have a snap check on this board? And when he checks, we reopened for half ball, but we were actually just supposed to go smaller. I just wanted to put pressure on his snap checking range. But yeah. Let's just say we go smaller for the sake of the video because I'm curious to see how the spot would play out like the next time I play it. Personally. And what was the run out? It was the 9 of diamonds, 3 of clubs, right? Check. I'm curious about the river sizing. Hijack, I'm polarizing to 75, want some overbetting. That makes sense at this depth. You can definitely include overbetting because actually you go bet 75, it's really actually hard to get stacks in on the river. So if you have a hand that wants to labor stacks, it's really incentivized to go bigger. But let's say I play B75 because I think with the ace deuce, that's the type of hand. What is 7-6 doing? 7-6 is playing a lot of B75, like a hand like 7-6 of hearts or something. Curious what straights are doing on the river here. Like, I'm sure it's ripping it, right? Yeah. I just felt like in practice I was not going to get called. But you're actually, okay, so you're ripping, like, you're playing only a rip strategy. The node played out different for us because we check turn. So let's say we check. I think 7-6 was finding checks. So. Obviously, if I bet, I think finding a rip's intuitive. The line was weirder here. And yeah, you're just not overbetting. You're building mainly your value range around. Let's look at the filters. Just overpair and top pair like queens. and Jack X. You see how you're not checking a single jack. So you're building most of your betting range in this node just around a jack. You're not checking any back, so you need to protect that range. So I'm sure this just goes in here. It doesn't make sense to just build a slightly other range. I mean, it obviously kind of wants to, but the very low frequency, but yeah. I think the key is just looking at how your range construction looks on the river there. And I played overbet at the time. God, I did it again. Oh, I remember this hand. This was the pocket 7-10. It's been like a while. I just remember every hand. I basically just think about playing poker. I'm pretty much a degenerate. Haven't been putting in too much volume though. I'm really planning on putting in more volume in the next couple months. I think June I'm going to pace myself, and then July I'm going to put in a ridiculous amount. I'm planning on playing a lot more in June. Right now I'm literally playing like 4 hours a day-ish, but I really want to up it. It's hard in Ontario. It's not always running. It's most of the time not running, actually. But right now I'm just focused on studying. In June I'm going to do probably like both, maybe lean a little more on playing than I am right now, and then in July it'll just be like review to play well and see how much money I can make in that month. Is the current plan, but like, you know, like life's changing all the time. So anyway, in here he went with the big bet. I'm not going to give him that because it's just so, I don't know. He shouldn't be playing it. And if he is, it's important to still look at the response maybe, because I think Wizard does a decent job at like still giving you a correct response, but it can be a little weird. And I think, yeah, 7s here is raising a good amount of the time, so yeah. But it's not raising as much as I thought it was. Obviously quad's checking. 9's actually checking more than 7s. I guess that makes sense. But you would still think 9's wants protection. But let's see what he's betting. Is he betting like enough overs? Yeah, he's still betting like pure overs. But yeah. He has a good amount of 9x in his betting range, which I guess changes it. Anyway, we played raise, and the main question was, how do we play the turn? Because I believe the turn was the deuce of diamonds. Yeah, it was basically a brick that completed a double draw. Or created a double draw, whatever the word for it is. And pocket 7s is just too weak to bet. I was like mad at myself in game for not finding it, because he had ace-5, but it makes sense. You're just building your betting range now around the 8. 9s is checking. It's just too thin. You're basically polarizing to just the 8, and you're barreling your equity. Which makes sense on this board. Yeah. I'm curious though, like let's give this a 3 diamonds. Like let's say it's not a paired board when we raised. We would have a lot less 7s, we wouldn't be raising flop. That makes sense, like I don't think you would really want to raise 7s on this flop now, when it's too common for your opponent to have an 8. Anyway, as played check. And then on the queen of clubs, there's just no way we had anything else to do, I believe. Did I bug it out? Oh, the turn was an 8. Wait. Let's give me some pocket 7s. Yeah, just pure checking. Context, what is opponent supposed to bluff with? Yeah, basically everything that's shit. If it doesn't have showdown here, which makes sense. And then how am I supposed to respond? I think in practice, like, people aren't finding this too wide, but... Oh wait, this is big. Yeah, we're not playing this. I misclicked. We're obviously reopening polar. And 7s of the club is calling 7s though. That's pretty... Makes sense. That's probably what I would do in game. Let's say he does check. You see here, you're very polar. Your trash hands almost are never betting. It needs some... What's our preferred size? Like here we're like just really doing a bad job on this card. Not checking back too many clubs, so we need to play like it kind of. Anyway, we went to another spot. Blind versus blind is interesting though. But it is too like time consuming. I think this was pre-flop. Oh yeah, this was the spot where my friend said I'm supposed to 3-bet to 30, but I'm actually supposed to go to 38. I went 35 in game. And my hand was finding it at a lower frequency. So it wasn't losing any EV. And I just think that spot is, I'm not maybe finding enough of these. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to take this. But the key is actually remember ace deuce. I think you could just remember ace deuce pure deeper. And that's something you can lean on. Basically the shitty deuce, the shitty ace-x that you 3-bet from the big blind, it's almost the same thing. Deeper, out of position, you just choose the... Sorry. Let's go to the big blind 3-bet range. It's the offsuit. Yeah. Oh, this is deeper. Let's go to 100 bigs. Why is it doing this? Okay. I don't want to do basic GPO. Let's do general. Yeah, you see, basically the ones you find from there are the ones that are your 3-bet bluffs when suited in position. 4-bet bluffs in position. 4-bet bluffs in position when suited. There you go. Deep stacked. If you can remember that. It's actually like, okay, I say it like it's so complex, but it's like really not that hard to remember. It's actually a pretty good rule of thumb. Obviously you have to roll it, but yeah, ace-6 doesn't do it here from under the gun, and ace-deuce. Okay, so not from UTG, which makes sense. UTG, you have to be a little more cautious because he's supposed to be very polar. Even from cutoff, so it actually is just big blind, I guess. King-6 gets in there, which makes sense, but it really is ace-deuce. I think the more common spot to respond is you actually have to find it out the small. This is probably the one spot I recommend you actually really do need to be precise deep in your 4-bet spots. Just because, I'm trying to see, yeah, you see 8-7 finds it actually at the number I rolled in game. It's just the big, it was a little tighter, which makes sense, but I don't know. It's just a weird node. It's just because this is actually a common spot. And you can apply a lot of pressure. And because you want to do it way more, you go to, holy shit, voice crack. You go to 30 instead of 38, because I'm assuming here we're at 8%. Oh, maybe we're at the same. Yeah, we're at 8% for both, so I take that back. Are we folding any more often? What's our folding looking like? Here folding 54. I'm assuming folding should be the same. 54, 57. You're folding a little more often. Huh. Anyway, I could dive into the types of hands that differentiate. Actually, you know what? I actually am really curious. I'm going to look. Deeper out of the big, are you finding the same hands? You're still getting in there with the 10-6 and the 10-7, which I remember. The connectors are like attacking very, very aggressively. Queen-Jack becomes pure, whereas if you go to 100, it's almost a pure call. So yeah, you just become a lot more aggressive actually, which is funny. You're out of position, but deeper. But I think you just gravitate way more to the value, and you start to get away. You're 3-betting 12%, and then you go here. You're actually 3-betting more, but you see how you have less of this random Jack X suited that I actually should find more. I don't find enough of this. 5-4 suited. You're supposed to find. You can get the pocket pairs in there. I'm assuming here it's just, and you're supposed to get this offsuit shit in. I'm assuming this offsuit shit goes away. For the most part. Yeah, it goes a lot down. Pocket pairs stay around the same, which makes sense. You need the coverage. 10 starts to flat a little, which also makes sense. And, yeah. Alright, back to real poker. How long have I been recording this? 33 minutes. Alright. Let me know what I can do to improve, if people actually like this. I can't imagine anyone liking it, but I don't know. Doing my best. Figured I'd do one for fun. Maybe I'll do it every now and then. Maybe I'll get better at doing it, obviously. Okay, here in the spot. This was a weird one. I think I took a quick look at it. This was the 8-7. Yeah, I'm supposed to never have 8-7 off here with something. Deeper. 8-7 off is just a pure fold. I thought at 100 bigs it was a mix, which is odd for me. You see 8-7, it's a pure, but deeper, your calling range goes, you're 46. And deeper, you see the big blind price, it just doesn't matter because of how much you can put pressure on you. That's something important to note, actually. If you're taking one thing away from this video, I think this spot can really change things. You're just way less defensive in the big blind deep stacked. It looks like you're almost playing a freaking button calling range, or under the gun opening range almost. I mean, obviously there's some differentiate, because you're playing some of this more like low nut making shit, and you're actually just getting rid of some of this stuff that has like, obviously in an opening range you want some higher cards because you block your opponents calling you or 3-betting you, whereas in a calling range you can just call hands that perform well when they see a flop. Anyway. But yeah, as played, let's just run it with 8-7 suited just out of curiosity. Obviously, it completely changes the hand, but when he goes check check on this flop, or this deep, it does feel like he's not supposed to have too many. Like he has a good amount of clubs, but I don't know. It feels like he's more incentivized to actually bluff his clubs. And 8-7 just felt like a good hand to bet. It looks like you're actually playing a lot of blocks here, centered around a lot of just top pair. That makes sense. A lot of Jack X just doesn't feel like going too big. 10s and 9s. And then obviously just some random stabs, I'm assuming. Like, what's the lowest hand? Sometimes I like to look at this. What's the least amount of equity? Spending a third here. Obviously 5-3. Queen 5. But this hand probably performs worse. So, yeah, you're just taking some random stabs with decent blocker effects. Obviously, you'd rather have 5-3 than Queen 5 of spades. But, what about EQR? But yeah, anyway, as played, he raised turn, which he should never do when he commits to checking back. His flushes should just continue one more slow play. Doesn't really make any sense. And I think I agree with that. Like, it's just, if you're going to commit to the trap, you commit to the trap. You know what I mean? Yeah, he's really not incentivized to have too much stuff. And then you're just supposed to trap it. As we played, we obviously just call our 8-7 and then check down. And yeah, I was just trying to think about the turn, and I think we played it well. I think 2 pairs is good enough to size up there. I'm curious if he doesn't raise, though. We should actually look at that. If our hand is too thin on this river. And I don't think it is. But maybe as played it is. But yeah. Okay, we're playing a block bet, which makes sense. How much EV would betting big lose at this end? Less than checking. So it doesn't really matter if you want to bet it. Just don't pussy out and check it. And then obviously we're playing flushes. To be a bit careful here. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to the next hand. Not gonna spend too much time on each decision or each thing. Oh yeah, this was the ace-5 of clubs hand. So he 3-bet me deep and I flatted here. I'm trying to think how often is ace-5 flat? And I thought it was a good amount. I'm going to the wrong spot every time. What am I doing? Yeah, it's a good amount. The ace-deuce getting in there. Obviously you can find these too and just ditch this. But I don't know, I think this one's kind of funny to have. Anyway, so obviously I give him 20%. I think in game he went a little bigger, but yeah, 20 and 33 makes the most sense. He went 20, right? Or he went 30. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And yeah, so I was thinking if our hand ever raises, and you still have to be very passive on this board. Like you can get in here with some raises, but it's mainly built around 7x and then low pocket pairs, which makes sense. It'd be kind of sick in game if you find it. You know what? Like maybe for fun I will too. Actually, we'll review the spot first, and I'll come back to this. I want to see what happens with these pairs if you take the 100 line. Are you just sending it full throttle? I'm sure you have to start giving up some. Anyway, he checks. Obviously, it's supposed to be he's supposed to actually have 8s here. Most people won't. Then we check in. We are supposed to just check back our ace-5. It didn't make sense in game. I was thinking like, do we just start betting to get called by kings? But in practice at the step, we're supposed to be careful. And then this was actually the sizing I chose in game, and it was the correct one, I believe. And here, the funny part is he's supposed to be very aggressive here. It's almost like not a mistake just to take your queen X and just shove. I think you want to block ace queen suited. That's like the one caveat, right? Or maybe not. You block clubs. The hearts, for some reason, don't like it. Let's look at it. So what cards do you want to go all in? You want the queens. Your all in range is built around a queen. But it really likes the queen of clubs and the queen of diamonds more than the queen of hearts. Which I wish I could figure out why. It obviously has something to do with this. Or, sorry, this. And maybe what my calling range looks like a little, but I doubt it. Because my calling range is going to be based around his bluffing range, so the bluffing range usually comes before that. We're supposed to mix fold queens, which is hilarious. Do we have AQO deep? Not really, no. Yeah, so you would think this would be our main call, right? So why does he not want to block it? So it's confusing to me. Like, what is the point of having the queen of diamonds? Like, it doesn't even block anything. Hmm. Is king queen of diamonds a call? No. That'd be insane. It'd be like a really bad call because you block his bluffs too, right? Like, that's probably just like super losing. Yeah. Oh. It's funny how king queen suited's a bet on the river, like a value bet. But it makes sense. Like, why would you check it ever? I'm trying to think. Must be something to do with our bluffs, maybe containing the queen. So we're pure bluffing queen jacking. Oh no, we're value betting. What are we talking about? I don't know. I can't figure it out. I'm a little too tired for this. I've been up almost 24 hours now. We'll find it later. This hand was interesting. It was deep stack, and he was supposed to put a lot of pressure on me here. Granted, he didn't. On the ace king board, he checked back. Good. It makes sense to play over better check here. We had ace queen. And you look at this board, he's just supposed to be very aggressive deep. And I was trying to look, but his ace king, you see, it's betting pure. I was trying to look if he free rolled me. Oh, here's a spot where you're just going very polar, because it doesn't really make, there's not too much incentive to bet too much a6. I think actually the higher a6 is, the less incentive is on the point, on this board now when there's a chop. Because you just block too much of his hands that he's going to bluff with. Or wait, sorry, I might say that wrong, I'm tired. But he has queens here and stuff, right? That you can get value from when you bet, which you're not going to get value from, whatever. Elsewhere, obviously queen x would be also his bluffs, so maybe checking also could be less, but like you do block bluffs, like that's so I definitely worded that, but yeah. Where were we at? Jack 8-8. Oh yeah, I was trying to see, just like I've been looking at a lot of blind versus blind lately, and I just wanted to see if what to do here on the flop. And I figured my hand 10-5 of diamonds was a frequency stab. So yeah. It was. Yeah, but just mainly sticking to bet 33 on these boards and finding about like 50%. Knowing what hands to not bet, basically that's the key, and then everything else is kind of mixing. And I think that's like the overall strategy. The first thing you should learn is what do you actually bet the least in in a spot like this, and then go from there. What do you bet the most, and then everything else is kind of mixing and learning what category it kind of goes into. But if you play enough poker and you study enough, you can figure that out. I think where most people struggle is just the other stuff, like when things just seem good and they're like also like they're fine, but then just staying there and staying at that mid level the whole time, it's just, I don't know, because you end up just being another guy who's like super predictable and just overfolding. They always have it, whatever, and a lot of your win rate comes down to exploits, but then you just feel like shit when you're in a downswing and stuff. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Oh, this board, I looked at this actually. I kind of spewed it. Here I thought I could lead on the turn. He bet 1/3 on the flop, I believe, which he's supposed to do. It's his preferred sizing when he bets. No, he's actually supposed to go a little polar. I think here it's a funny spot. I never have 8-6 off, and he has 8-6 suited, and I have 8-6 suited, I believe, pure. So it's not a really, even though it's a low connected board, it doesn't have a straight advantage like another board would. And that's an important thing to know. Note. If it was what's a card where I might have some offsuit straights that he would not have. I'm blanking so hard right now. I can just look down here. Obviously, actually the cutoff is 9-8 and 10-8, 10-9. I'm sure a 9. What's it called? If the 9 was a 6 is basically what I was thinking of. Because we will have 8-5 suited pure. Yeah, you see now he starts to size down. Button actually has 8-5 suited pure. Oh, I should have been looking here. Yeah, it's mainly the lower ones where the 5-3 suited and the 5-2 suited have straights. You have to be a little careful. 7-4 suited, I think. He doesn't have? Yeah. Stuff like that. Anyway, what was the fucking board? I think it was this. Pretty sure. Oh no, it wasn't. No, I know what it was. It was. Let's just pull up the sim again. Sorry about this. Pulled it up again like a dumbass. So I call flop. He bets. Obviously, we're playing very aggressive with raise. We rolled a lower number, if I believe in this hand, and I just think King 8's not too attractive of a raise. Obviously, the suited version with backdoors becomes much more appealing. I think here also the bigger bet is also more attractive. You're just way more polarizing because it makes sense. I think just on a human level, it's easier to play the strategy playing mainly bigger raises and just being very aggressive with your really nutted hands on this board, and then just finding these other types of hands. And we liked for the call, and I thought I could lead on the 6, but we actually don't have that big of a straight advantage, and we have a slight equity advantage, but yeah, it basically doesn't warrant a lead. I was wrong. I think versus under the gun, if we run the spot, we probably could play leads versus under the gun. Let's say he bets a third, and we call, and it's a 6. Was it a rainbow 6? Doesn't matter. You see, you can be very aggressive. Just with the button has too many straights, because you saw earlier it was like 19 and 17 of straights, now it's 16 and a 9. The equity advantage is very different. So yeah, I'm curious, would a hand like King 8 suited become profitable? Oh, the card was not a, let's make it an 8. Let's be realistic here. Okay, you see even more aggressive, and yes, even King 8 would be leading pure. Alright, so I don't feel too bad, I just had the wrong read of the situation. And then the river went check, which was fine by both players, I think. Oh, we have this board. This was the pocket 6's hand. I literally remember all these hands. I'm supposed to overbet or check. And on the flop, I believe this is the strategy I mainly pilot. So, and you see it's pretty close to a fine strategy, and I was right about my read. I said in game that the lower pocket pairs, as long as you beat some, we're checking more often, and then the very low ones are betting. And it made sense. So 6 is actually a pure check in this hand, which makes sense. Opponent checks turn on a king, which is obviously a good card for us. But 6s stay checking. You just have other hands with more equity to bet. And then on the river, I was just really confused when I actually spike our card and he bets. I think he bet the right size here. Yeah, he basically bets fine size. Obviously 6s are pure raising. Am I on a simple sim? I thought I saw a different strategy earlier. But I picked 50% in game, and this is what it's doing. But I saw a strategy where it was going 80%, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe that was versus the block. Yeah. Alright, we actually played it perfect. I thought I played it wrong, but no, we played it. Yeah. Because the other player just has many straights there, and if you raise the 6s, obviously just have to call off. Maybe not a stack, it actually starts to mix, and maybe you could just exploitively start folding, because like, whatever. Just take a note of that and play maybe a hand that's slightly weirder, just to see. Because I think that's one thing you can do is if you end up in the spot where this guy's constantly spewing because you could be slightly capped, just do some weird line one time. And just see what he's tabling on showdowns. Because I recommend those spots are generally underbluffed. Anyway. Here was the hand where I called ace-7 suited pre. And here I already looked at this hand. My opponent checked in game when we hit the trips. Or no, he checked pre. He's checked on the flop, which he's supposed to check range here. If you look, never bet these spots basically as the three better, because you basically have so much less of the sets than I do, and just like the overall good hands. Like, yeah, my whole range hits this board. It's really hard to miss, and you're out of position. It's too hard to stuff. So many bad cards come off for you on the turn, which is the main thing. I think on the flop you're doing okay, but just so many turns come off, and they're gonna be so hard to play out of position with a with like a lower SPR where you have to call off so many hands, you're just basically burning money. So yeah, checking range performs way too well. I meant like just basically the main strategy. At 100 bigs, you can start to play different strategies where you bet like 15% with overpairs, and you just play like a small 75 strategy on this board, which is also fine. I think it performs pretty well, but I think deeper you just have to resort to. The bet 75 loses its power because you can't shorten the SPR enough that fast. Anyway, I don't know why I'm looking at reports. Here when he when we picked the right strategy, I went for 20% in game, but it actually doesn't mind sizing up to 33. I think something to do with the deep stack. If I just click 100, will it just rug my whole sim? Hopefully not. Okay, it did. We're back. Okay, so I played 20 in game, and I'm gonna run this with 33 and see how it differentiates. Both times when he checks on the flush, we have to be careful. I think here you actually wanted to the strategy is actually to gig or polarize around the flush, and look to just get after it with the ace, because you actually do have offsuit bluffs here, and just really play for stacks with the boats too. And I misread the strategy there because I obviously I don't think I lost too much EV for B75 here. I basically lost nothing. And my opponent called in game too, so with the trip, so I kind of like it, just building the pot. I think in reality it's higher EV than it looks. And then as played on the river, a small wind's supposed to, yeah, as played on the river, yeah, we have to shove it. Let's see if we get a strategy where we actually have a lot of hands, like an overbet, because that's where like most of our range is supposed to be doing. And what was the river? It's like a 4. I believe clubs doesn't really matter. Actually, it slightly does, but for like 5-4 and shit. Or that wouldn't affect it. But yeah, if we do find it, obviously main size is still shove. Shoving flushes. King queen's good enough. King 10's good enough. Spades. Is there any flushes you like check for no reason? No. Never check a flush here. That would be obviously dumb. Oh, I should look at. I was curious what opponent is supposed to bluff catch me with, so we will briefly look at that. Because I'm assuming most of his hands are mixing. He has some traps, but he's pretty capped. And yeah, he just has to mix with the spades hands. You don't want the ace of spades here, actually. This is a funny spot, because most of my bluffs contain the ace of spades. So you'd rather have a hand that blocks ace queen suited, ace jack suited, ace 10 of spades, even in the synod. Than aces with the ace of spades, because it's a 3-bet pot, and all my bluffs are built around then a flush blocker. Like ace king off and ace queen off are basically the pure bluffs, and we have all of these hands. Obviously they all contain the ace of spades, but if you have the ace of spades, it's like, did I not pick the right sizing on the turn? I want to actually see my hands. Is it just 175? So confused. Why does it give me no hands? Okay, we'll go 175 here. And then we go all in. What was I doing? I lost my train of thought. And we can actually look at what we're supposed, what the best physical card is to call. I think it's gonna be the ace of spades, but that doesn't necessarily mean the blocker is the best. Call 6 of spades. So you really want the 6 of spades? Wait, do I have this? Oh, I have this wrong. What am I talking about? Yeah, so the best card you can have. Yeah, I was so confused. The best card you can have is the jack of spades in 10, like I said, and the ace is actually the third one. Queen and 8 is slightly lower. I don't know, but I wouldn't worry about it. But the main context is here is the ace not being as important as you might think it is. Like you see how valuable the jack is. But yeah. Anyway. That's just like a spot. Obviously, you react with your blockers to what your opponent is doing, especially in these larger pots where their 3-bet range could be completely different. You have a read on them. their value betting range on the river, their bluffing range even looks completely different, then you're gonna have to go with that because all it takes is one slight shift and the blockers will completely change on what's valuable. It's important to know because that you're not dropping EV just because it's like, okay, if I play like this, I'm winning. I don't know. And if your opponents are doing weird shit, they're probably doing weird shit. And learning this is like way more profitable in the long term than any money. If you mastered this type of game theory, you would print for the rest of your life. So I don't know about these spots. These spots have like insanely complex, to be honest, but yeah. Anyway, this was a fun spot. This wasn't on the video. Coming up an hour, we'll try and wrap this up in the next 5 minutes. I had ace 4 clubs here in this spot, and my opponent obviously bet 25 on the flop. He's doing that with his range. And we had ace 4 clubs, and we just call. Not playing any raises on this board. I'm not building any raises on king. I'll show you the board. Right? King of spades, 9-5-4. Not building any raises on that board. Turn was a 5. Or the turn was a 4. Okay. Turn was a 4, so we actually hit a pair. And villain checks. If you look, he's actually supposed to be checking a lot here with the king jack of clubs. Aces are pure betting, which makes sense because you unblock the calling range. King's pure checking. Ace king can sometimes mix. Actually likes betting more with the club, funny enough. Aces here. Yeah, with the ace of clubs, that's your main like trap. Ace king off. I'm assuming you would have it pure, but like the reason it doesn't have it that often is because it's playing cold shows with it on the flop, which I kind of don't like that you can't turn that off because it's kind of annoying when you're running a sim and it's just like it's assuming you're cold shoving all your ace king when like I don't know. Anyway, when he checks, we're actually supposed to down bet with our ace 4 clubs here most of the time, or about half the time. And I was thinking like in game, like this is such an underpair line, like it's just an underpair to the king ripped line. Like, and if he is checking, let's say he is trapping, it's gonna be ace of clubs, ace king off, right? Like with the ace of clubs. Usually, like that's the type of trap you're gonna have because the king was the king wasn't a club, so, but nonetheless, it's still what's it called? You're not running into the trapped king X, it feels like as much when you have the ace of clubs. And the trapped aces, like obviously, and we saw in the sim, he's not supposed to have that, but yeah. Anyways, turn, river, he checks, we brick, it's a 5. And here I just don't think I beat anything. It's like one of the worst hands I can have. Even though you're not supposed to really bluff with the clubs, you see it's making 7 bigs. It's making 7 bigs to jam this much money, which is crazy on a bluff. Like that's how punting it would be. And I felt really bad here because my opponent had king jack of clubs, which is obviously just a pure call. It makes less than the other ones, but obviously you're not folding a king here ever. And yeah, I felt pretty bad. And then this was another board I played versus the Reggie guy, whatever AIvers on GG or on Stars, and it was a single raise pot. Here you win 33. I think easy rule of thumb here is just you can beat 20 on these triple Broadway boards. I don't need to get too into it because I'm on a time crunch, but yeah, I recommend doing that. Turn was what? It was an 8 of hearts, I believe. And he B75s. Here he's supposed to overbet because he went 1/3, so we can give him the OB size. And here it's actually important. Like the spot in practice feels so underbluffed. Like people aren't really going this in with aces, are they, in their game? They're like checking in and pot controlling. Even I'm guilty of doing that. Whereas you're clearly we called and it was like some brick. I don't know. And obviously here he shoved with his hand, and we had king 10. And I felt pretty bad because I think in this spot, any of you watching, if you play micros, you can just pure fold the spot. When the board doesn't change for 3 streets straight, it's really hard. People don't find enough bluffs, I would say, in this spot. Obviously, my call was making like $1 bajillion on the river, and it would be like giga griefing to fold. I felt really shitty in game. I feel like this hand is rarely good. You see how it's making 22 big ones, but it's only good 30% of the time. That's an important thing to realize. You're not going to be good here most of the time, but you still have to call because you'd be like griefing. Yeah, I think the call's making the least amount of money on the turn. No, it's still making 20 bigs. Folding would... Or sorry. Oh, it's mixing on the turn. So yeah, you see you actually could have got away from this hand, I guess. That's because I gave him an overbet. As played when it was 1/3 and 75. Yeah, it's weird with the wizard. It's really hard to tell. But yeah, I do regret calling there. I think making your opponent work for the bluffs. Actually, I wanted to see, the main reason I wanted to look at the spot is what he is actually bluffing with. Obviously, he doesn't have a real range if we don't give him B20 on the flop, which is kind of unfortunate that I have to redo this whole sim. Or, sorry. Let's just give him 75. Or what is he even overbetting that's like weaker? My opponent had queen nine of spades in the sun, by the way, if anyone cares. Yeah, you're supposed to just find these sevens and tens with the double blocker, or sevens with the heart. The spade isn't actually too good anymore. It's old. Nines with the double blocker, and yeah, some random ace seven shit. You see how like unintuitive this shit is to find? Yeah, I think it's something to do with how my ace queen suited would respond or something. Yeah, most of my ace queen suited would be raising those combos and calling the others, I guess. So. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching. This might be a really boring video, but anyway, yeah, that's how I study most of my hands when I study. Granted, I was doing more of a review because I looked at some of these hands briefly, and also when I study, I sometimes waste a little bit too much time. Or no, I don't waste time. I kind of fiddle around with it more, but on a time crunch on a video. Maybe I'll do maybe 1 or 2 hand reviews in the next session and go way more in depth. But yeah. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching. I'm out.